Moses was faithful in all his house as a servant for a testimony of those things which were to be spoken, but Christ was a faithful son over his house, whose house we are. He's building us up if we hold fast our confidence and boast of our hope. Again, so it goes into the idea of basically not turning away. So you get this, talks about the unbelief of Israel in the wilderness, the fact that they did not enter into God's rest, right? That was a promise in the Psalms. As I swore my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. He goes into this. So therefore, if oh goodness, Joshua, right? The next one who follows after Moses, who leads them in the promised land. Again, another picture of our Lord Jesus, but a type. But anyways, he says, for if Joshua had given the rest, he would not have spoken of another day. So there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. The one who has entered his rest has himself also rested from his works. Okay, so therefore let us be diligent to enter that rest, lest anyone fall into the same example of disobedience, right? The lack of faith is disobedience. All right, and so you get this idea here. But then, therefore, since we have a great high priest, there's the high priest concept again, who has passed through the heavens. Where did he ascend to? Right hand of the Father. He has passed through the heavens. Jesus, the Son of God. Let us take hold of our confession. Remember to confess our Lord Jesus. He is the one in this role of high priest, right, who's passed through the heavens. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, right? In other words, he knows what we've suffered and gone through. But one who has been tempted in all things like we are, yet without sin. He remained sinless. Therefore, now, here's the key. Therefore, let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. So, the idea, what do you mean draw near? When did they draw near? Well, on Yom Kippur, as we read, this idea, they would draw near to God. They had to be humbled. They humble their souls, do no work, and they draw near to God to witness the high priest basically offer the sacrifice on their behalf to make atonement for their sins, to sprinkle the blood upon the mercy seat, to be accepted before God. And then their sins would be spoken of and cast out. And it is in this process that they draw near to God. Okay? But again, it was the work of the high priest. They didn't do anything. They simply came by faith. Because think about it. If God gives us as a command and you don't believe his word, then you're not going to come, are you? That's why the gospel is a command, because you're already in disobedience. You're already far from God. And that's why it talks about being cast into outer darkness. That's why it's cast out into the lake of fire for eternal punishment at the great white throne judgment. You're cast out, away, far. The opposite of that is to draw near, but you don't come in just how you want. You come by God's standard. And he says, by my son. He says, Father says, I sent my son. You come to me through my son. That's why Jesus says in John 14:6, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That's the language of high priest. That's what he does. That's what it means to draw near to God. You can't draw near to the Father apart from the Son. That's why the Jews right now who reject the Son are not drawing near to God. Now, does God still have a plan for national Israel? Yes, we're going to see that. I did a whole study on that as well. Romans 8 through 11, when you read through it all, it makes a lot of sense. God has individual election, right? He elects some to mercy and salvation, but he also, as Deuteronomy 7 talks about, he had a unique love and election of them, also to bring about the purpose of the Messiah. But there's other reasons as well. All of this to say, right? It's dualistic in nature, but we who are elected to salvation, especially Gentiles, right? Even if you saw, again, remind you, it wasn't just natural born, right, who drew near to God. Remember this when we read it. Sorry. Leviticus 23. Remember who it's for. Right? Shall humble your souls. Any person who will not humble. Right? It's statute. But again, it's why it talks about any person, because, so forgive me, it was in 16 when it summarizes it. Okay. But here, again, the purpose of it, the sons of Israel, where did I see it? Yeah, whether the native or the sojourner who sojourns among you. And again, there's a distinction between foreigner, right, who is not believing upon God. The foreigners were ones that just came into national Israel, but they didn't follow after God or his law. Sojourners, like, like Ruth, for example, they would fall into the category of sojourner, who basically believed and trusted in God, followed his law, right, out of obedience, because they have faith in him. And so it was in that they could come and partake. In fact, the first time it is mentioned is in the Passover in Exodus 12. Sojourners, not natives, sojourners could partake of the Passover, especially like the men, if they were circumcised. In other words, they are being obedient to God's law, and it's not because they're being obedient, it's because they have faith in God, and their obedience comes out from their faith. Okay? So, again, the sojourner here, right, is also commanded, but they could come. Okay? So, all that to say, we are grafted in to Israel as, in a sense, like a sojourner who comes in now, and we are grafted in. And so we see that blessing there. But in Hebrews 4, that's what it's pointing out. Therefore, let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in the time of need.